Utilitarianism, a comprehensive summary. Utilitarianism, a cornerstone of consequentialist ethics, centers around the principle of maximizing overall happiness and minimizing suffering. This philosophy, founded by Jeremy Bentham and further developed by John Stuart Mill, has had a profound impact on moral and political thought. The principle of utility. This fundamental idea posits that an action is morally right if it produces the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. Happiness in this context is generally understood as pleasure and the absence of pain. Consequentialism. The core of utilitarianism lies in its consequentialist nature. Actions are judged solely by their outcomes. If an action leads to the greatest overall good, it is considered morally right, regardless of intentions or motives. Hedonistic foundations. Bentham, a radical thinker of the Enlightenment, viewed pleasure and pain as the sole motivators of human behavior. He famously declared, "Nature has placed mankind under the governance of two sovereign masters, pain and pleasure." The hedonic calculus. To quantify pleasure and pain, Bentham developed the hedonic calculus, a framework for assessing actions based on factors such as intensity, duration, certainty, propinquity, nearness in time, fecundity, likelihood of leading to further pleasure, purity, likelihood of being followed by pain, and extent, number of people affected. Act utilitarianism. This core version of the theory argues that the right action in any given situation is the one that directly produces the greatest overall happiness. Each individual action must be evaluated on its own merits, considering its specific consequences. Higher and lower pleasures. Mill, recognizing the limitations of Bentham's purely quantitative approach, introduced the distinction between higher and lower pleasures. He argued that intellectual and aesthetic pleasures, example, reading, music, philosophy, are qualitatively superior to purely sensual ones, example, eating and drinking. Competent judges. Mill argued that individuals who have experienced both types of pleasures invariably prefer higher pleasures, demonstrating their superior quality. It is better to be a human being dissatisfied than a pig satisfied. Better to be Socrates dissatisfied than a fool satisfied. This famous quote encapsulates Mill's belief that higher pleasures, even if less immediately gratifying, ultimately lead to greater overall happiness. Utilitarianism, a comprehensive summary. Books.google.com. Books.google.com. Rule utilitarianism. Recognizing the practical difficulties of applying the hedonic calculus to every individual action, Mill proposed rule utilitarianism. This version suggests that adhering to general rules that have historically proven to maximize happiness is often more effective than constantly assessing individual actions. Difficulty of calculation. Predicting the future. Accurately forecasting the consequences of actions is incredibly challenging. Measuring subjective experiences. Quantifying pleasure and pain is inherently subjective and difficult to measure objectively. Information limitations. Acquiring complete information about all potential consequences and their impact on everyone affected is often impossible. Information limitations. Acquiring complete information about all potential consequences and their impact on everyone affected is often impossible. Information limitations. Acquiring complete information about all potential consequences and their impact on everyone affected is often impossible. Potential for injustice. Tyranny of the majority. Utilitarianism could potentially justify sacrificing the rights and well-being of minorities for the benefit of the majority. Distribution of happiness. The theory may not adequately address issues of equitable distribution of happiness, and could potentially lead to situations where the happiness of a few outweighs the suffering of many. Focus on consequences. Neglect of intentions and motives. Utilitarianism primarily focuses on outcomes, potentially overlooking the moral significance of intentions, motives, and character. The problem of right versus good. Critics argue that utilitarianism struggles to distinguish between actions that are morally right and actions that simply have good consequences. Partiality. Prioritizing loved ones. Utilitarianism seemingly demands impartiality, yet human beings naturally prioritize the well-being of their loved ones. This can create a conflict between personal obligations and the demands of maximizing overall happiness. Mill. acknowledged the limitations of calculating happiness in every instance, and emphasized the importance of general rules and social customs that have proven effective in promoting well-being. He also stressed the importance of individual liberty and the harm principle, which states that individuals should be free to pursue their own happiness as long as they do not harm others. Rural utilitarianism. This approach aims to address some of the concerns raised by ACT utilitarianism by focusing on the overall utility of following certain rules, rather than assessing each individual action. A potential conflict. The emphasis on maximizing overall happiness can sometimes appear to conflict with the concept of human rights. Critics argue that utilitarianism could potentially justify violating individual rights, if doing so would lead to greater overall happiness. Mill's response. Mill, while not explicitly endorsing the concept of human rights as we understand them today, recognized the importance of individual liberty and the harm principle. These principles, while not based on inherent rights, effectively function as a safeguard against the potential tyranny of the majority. Global justice. Utilitarianism raises important questions about global justice and the distribution of resources in a world characterized by significant inequalities. Animal welfare. Utilitarian principles have been applied to animal welfare, leading to arguments for animal rights based on the capacity to experience pleasure and pain. Environmental ethics. Utilitarian considerations play a crucial role in environmental debates, with arguments often focusing on the long-term consequences of environmental degradation for human and non-human well-being. Utilitarianism, despite its limitations, remains a powerful and influential ethical theory. It provides a framework for ethical decision-making.